Good morning, guys. This is Tom. I'm making a video pretty much discussing everything I've done so far, starting in trucking and getting on, starting my career, what I did before, what I have been doing since I started, and where I'm ending up so far, and what my plans are for the future. Right now, well, let's just start from the beginning. So, before I got into trucking, I was a TWIC escort, which is pretty much a government cleared security escort, which pretty much allows people who don't have a government clearance to go into secure locations in the port to pick up freight that they need to pick up. So, for example, brand new cars, uh, oversized loads, tractors, trailers, paper, anything that's going overseas pretty much, or coming in from overseas. I was doing that for roughly about 2.5 years. I was making about $10 an hour, which was not a decent amount, because out of that $10 I was paying for my own fuel, and I was also paying for oil changes and all that stuff. All general maintenance I was paying for. I was using my own personal car, so I was paying for all expenses. From there, I went to Prime, which some people might know it as Prime, some people might know it as Prime Transport, or whatever you want to call it. Prime is a big major company based out of Missouri. They're in the southwest end of Missouri. That's where I pretty much got my CDL. So I applied there, I came there, they Greyhound me down. I was there for roughly about a week in their hotel for orientation. Keep in mind, this is about 3 years ago. Sorry about the noise in the background. My dog is in the cage and he's playing with his bone. So I went to Prime, I got my CDL after the first week, and then they put me in the advanced class because I was more of a faster learner, as they were saying. So I was in night classes, and they were just experimenting with the advanced classes at this point. It wasn't actually anything serious. It was just an experiment for them, and they were taking all the faster learners and putting them in the advanced class. Once I got my CDL, I started going into night classes, which would in turn become the pre-trip during night, and then every other day you would either be on the field or in the simulator classroom. In the simulator classroom, you learned pretty much how to shift, how to drive, how to maneuver the vehicle in certain scenarios and different weather conditions, etc., etc. From there, I went to, so every other day it was the simulator and the field. In the field, you would actually learn a physical pre-trip on the vehicle, and you would also drive around the course, learn how to back up, different backing maneuvers, and occasionally you'd take it out on the road to test your road skills. After about, I'd say, 3 weeks, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, I can't remember. Keep in mind, this is 2 or 3 years ago. Well, no, 3 or 4 years ago, my bad. After that, I took my test, and then I got on the truck with a trainer, and I started my training period. So there were 2 different versions of their training. You have the advanced class, which is what I did, which you would pretty much learn everything that you need to do to pass your CDL on the computer and in the field on the training pad. The second portion, for the non-advanced portion, like the other version of the advanced portion, is you'd actually go out on the truck with the trainer, and he would teach you all that in the field. And then after that, you hit your second stage of training, which is then you go out on the truck with the trainer, and you actually learn the business side, which I think you have to get 40,000 miles worth of in that section. But I passed that. I was with my trainer. He, at the time, was a lease operator, and he's been with the company for about 7 years at that point. He was loving it. His dispatcher at the time was doing great, and so I didn't want to go into the company trucks, which was a short cab, pretty much. You didn't have any cabinets. You only had the driver's seat, the passenger seat, which you can take out, and the bed. No cabinets, no nothing. You had a lightweight truck, as they called it. It wasn't very comfortable, it wasn't very roomy, and they wanted me to be out 3-4 months at a time before I went home for about, 3 or 4 days. So I said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go lease operator, like my trainer, who my trainer told me straight off the bat, don't ever go lease operator straight off the bat. The reason why is very clear, because you don't understand anything about the industry, which I completely agree now that I've been out on the field for almost 3 or 4 years. But just coming into the industry, I didn't realize that, and I was stubborn, as you can say. I mean, I did grow up in New York. So I decided to go my own route, and I went lease operator. I wasn't making any money. Reason why is because Prime was nickeling and diming me to death for everything. The inverter, the APU, the fuel, the Easy Pass, even if I didn't use it. You know, the Qualcomm. They nickel and dime you to death for everything, which most people will not tell you in that. And that's almost everywhere. Every place you go will almost nickel and dime you to death, unless you purchase your own truck from a dealership and go that route. But that's a whole nother story for a different video. So I wasn't making any money, mostly because, not because I was not running, because the dispatcher, I thought that my trainer dispatcher was pretty good, so I decided to stay with him. Since I went lease operator, I stayed with him, and he kept staying me up in the New York area. Now, I understand it's a very good experience for new drivers to go up to the New York area to learn how to maneuver in tight areas, to learn how to deal with traffic and everything, but I kept telling him, I want to get out of the New York area. I don't want to stay in the New York area. I want to be going Midwest. Every single time I told him that, which was every single day, I never got a load there. I was always going from Pennsylvania to New York City to Pennsylvania. I was not a dedicated driver. I was an OTR driver. I was not making any money doing that because I kept sitting in traffic. I kept having breakdowns with the truck. It was non-stop. Just pretty much put it this way. I was making roughly about, going back and forth, being an owner-operator, I was making roughly about $2,000, but my expenses as an owner-operator were roughly about $3,000 to $4,000, mostly because I didn't follow their fuel route, because me being stubborn, I said I don't want to follow that, and I'm going to pick my own place of fuel. That's one of the perks of being an owner-operator, or a lease operator. You can purchase fuel wherever you want, but the company gave me a specific fuel route and everything to help me with that, but I didn't want to follow it because I didn't want to listen to the company, because they, from what I was saying, was trying to set me up for failure. So I was with them roughly about a month, and after a month of making no money, I quit the company, and I owed them money. I owed them roughly about $4,000, which I agreed with them over the course of the next year I would pay for it in payments. Now, who would think you would go to work and work for them for a month and then have to pay them $4,000? That's not including the training cost. That's just the expenses that I lost over a month of working for them, being a lease operator. So right off the bat, that's a bad thing. From there, I went to Knight Transportation. Knight Transportation, at the time, keep in mind I was living in Baltimore, Maryland, so they hired me and they said, okay, well, we're going to want you to go out with a trainer for about 2 weeks because you're brand new. I'm like, that's fine, I'll go out with a trainer. I went out with a trainer. We were mostly running, I'd say, anywhere east of Missouri. I was based out of Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which for Knight Transportation is a very bad terminal. From there, so I had my dog on the truck, not the one I have right now, it's a different one, but I had my dog on the truck, and right off the bat, after I finished training, they came in, they put me into a 2014 ProStar International. Now, anyone who's been in the trucking industry for any period of time, ProStar Internationals have a very bad reputation in the 2014, 2015 area, and some of the 2016s, have a very, very bad reputation because they constantly break down. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a very comfortable truck. It's got a lot of space, it's got a lot of room, but the breakdowns and the nuisance of it is very bad. Before I even left the yard, okay, they sent me a load going right down to Maryland to go pick up, to go home to load up my truck and then go from there. Before I left the yard, I told them, hey, I have a DEF issue, so I was governed at 35 because I have a DEF issue, and my AC was not working. Keep in mind, it's 90-something degrees with no AC. So they said, don't worry, you're only going 80 miles down the road to Baltimore, Maryland from Carlisle, PA. You're going to deliver a load in Baltimore and then go home for the weekend, load up your truck, and then right after that, we got a load going right back to the terminal for you to get repairs. Me being a new driver, I didn't realize I can say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not leaving the yard until this truck is fixed. I didn't know that being a new driver. Being a new driver, you need to know some of this stuff, which I didn't get taught being a student. But so I took the truck down the road. I delivered the load and I went home, loaded my truck up. And then right after that, I got a message saying, oh, you never finished your Smith System training, which is pretty much a safety course. So because you couldn't do it at the Carlisle terminal and our instructor is out on the road, he's in California at the moment, we're going to send you up to Columbus, Ohio for training. So I called my dispatcher and I said, hey, well, I was supposed to come right back to the terminal because I have a DEF issue and I have, a AC issue. I don't have any blowing AC, and it's 90, 100 degrees outside, and you want me to go work and pick up a load and take it all the way to Columbus, Ohio, which normally that's only like 500 miles. That's about a day's run, which shouldn't take me that long. But then they had me go all the way up to go fill up on DEF, which it wasn't that I didn't have any DEF, it was the fact that I had a DEF issue and wouldn't regen. So I was governed at, I think it was 35 or 40, something like that. But then they sent me all the way down to the other side of Maryland, to Marlboro, Maryland, to pick up a load going to Columbus, Ohio. And they took me on 95 to 70 to 68 back onto 70. That's the routing that they wanted me to follow. Being a company driver at the time, I had to follow their routing. Their routing was really bad, especially since I was fully loaded. I was 80,000 pounds, I was super heavy, and I was trying to climb hills at 35, 40 miles an hour. Keep in mind, I had my flashers on the whole way. In one day, I managed to go maybe 250 miles. I got to the border of Maryland and Pennsylvania on 68. I got to the nearest rest area and I shut down. It's about 97 degrees at 11 o'clock at night. I can't sleep because I'm twisting and turning in my bed. So I go out onto the bench in the rest area and I try and sleep. I can't fall asleep because every 3 seconds there's another truck coming in, turning, with his high beams on or whatever, waking me up. So I can't fall asleep, so I just sit in the truck and wait for my 10-hour break to finish. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night, and then I drove up to Columbus, Ohio, and after I finally got there, I T-called the load in the yard, and then I was sitting there for roughly about 4 days. My terminal would not pay for a hotel ticket or a hotel because they said that I had a perfectly working truck, which I clearly told them I don't. So Columbus, Ohio was paying for hotels for me, and in that time, the Columbus yard, every yard for night transportation at the time was its own separate group. So they pay for their own trucks, they pay for their own drivers, it's very complicated in that sense. And from there, after 4 days, they finally got my truck in the shop, and they said, what's wrong with it? I said, well, it's got no AC, it's got DEF issue, and there was a whole bunch of other stuff wrong with it. So, in short, pretty much, they gave me a truck with bed bugs, a fire hazard truck, no AC, no DEF, and they expected me to run cross country. And when I shut down that night in Baltimore, well, not in Baltimore, in Maryland, on 68 at the rest area, the next morning I got a call from the dispatcher saying, "Why aren't you there? It's a 500-mile run. I don't think this job's right for you." And me being a driver, I may be a new driver, but that really ticked me off. Pretty much someone telling me I don't know how to do my job, which I know how to do my job, just give me a working truck. So, in short, night transportation was screwing me over left and right, and me being a rookie, I didn't know that I can fight it. In the end, after about 3 months of working with them, I was on a first name basis with Kevin Knight, who is the owner of the company. Keep in mind, he's in, I think he was in Arizona, I can't remember. Keep in mind, this is like 3 years ago. From there, I had a buddy of mine who worked at, there was another company in Salt Lake City, Utah, James H. Clark and Son. So the final straw that I had with night transportation that made me quit was they gave me another truck and they sent me up to Albany, New York, and my truck was on fire in Albany, New York, and they expected me to drive to the shop. The address that they gave me was downtown Albany, New York's courthouse. Keep in mind, I'm driving to New York with a smoking truck that you can see for miles, and they send me to Albany, New York's courthouse on a Saturday morning. Thankfully, it was a Saturday and not Friday or Thursday or whatever. But my final straw was that. They sent me to Albany, New York with a smoking truck and expected me to drive it. But I turned my truck in, I quit, and my buddy who was working at James H. Clark and Son in Salt Lake City, Utah, they were a reefer unit company. They only had roughly about 100 trucks. Now keep in mind, Prime is a reefer unit company. They had, at the time, it was 6,000 to 7,000 trucks. Knight at the time was a dry van company, or the side that I was on was dry van. They also had reefer, and I think they also had intermodal, I'm not sure. But I was on the dry van division, and they had roughly about 13,000 trucks, or drivers. So this is my first time going with a small company who only had about 100 trucks. Now, James H. Clark and Son, I wouldn't recommend to anyone. Reason why is because of what the owner / the son, because the company was founded back, I want to say in the 70s or 60s, and the person who founded it is passed away, so it's down to the children now, and the children have no idea how to run it. But they were paying 38 cents a mile, and I was getting pretty decent money running wise. The dispatchers were okay, they ran me well, but I drove my personal car from Baltimore, Maryland to Salt Lake City, Utah for orientation. Got there, did orientation, had my dog on the truck with me, all that jazz. Was running for them for probably around 3-4 months, and then I had an incident where I went to, they had me fill up in the 49er in California. I was filling up my truck with fuel. I had my headset on, so this ear was covered, this ear was not. I was on the phone, I was filling up, and Celadon drove through the pumps at about 40 miles an hour and cut his wheel, and was just going through the pumps at really fast speeds, and popped his trailer tire about a foot away from my ear, because it was right on the other side of the pump as I was putting up my own pump. So it ruptured my eardrum to this day, I still have hearing issues out of this ear. I was dizzy, I was lightheaded, I was hearing a loud ringing, I couldn't really drive, so walked inside, tried to get some water to get my surroundings. I called dispatch, told them what happened. They're like, okay, well, if you can try to make it back to the terminal. I said, I'll do my best. It took me 2 days to go about 700 miles because I was really taking my time because I was dizzy, I was lightheaded, my vision was kind of blurry. I really shouldn't have done that, but I had to do what I had to do. So I got back to the terminal in Salt Lake City, Utah. They sent me over to a MedExpress. MedExpress said, okay, we're sending you home on workers' comp for 3 weeks, and then we want you to come back in to see how you're doing. I'm like, all right, that's fine. So keep in mind, I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm at the terminal in Salt Lake City, Utah. So I go back to the terminal, I tell them what's going on. I speak to the owner. Okay, I'm not going to put any names out there, but I spoke to the owner, told him what happened, and I asked him, okay, keep in mind this is 10 o'clock in the morning. I say, hey, this is what's going on. Is it okay if I stay in my truck? Because I have to drive all the way back to Baltimore, otherwise, unless they want to fly me. So they said they wouldn't fly me, and I can stay in my truck. And then at 12 o'clock, he comes to me and says, okay, we're going to need you out of your truck because we need that truck available for someone else. So we're going to send you on home time on workers' comp. I said, okay, that's fine. Now, my buddy who's working there just took a load at 9 o'clock, leaving up to Wyoming, and he would be back there the next day. So I said, hey, I understand you want me to clean out my truck and move and drive back to Baltimore. Can we wait one day, because my buddy who is going up to Wyoming, he will be back here tomorrow to be able to help me take everything out of my truck. Keep in mind, I'm an OTR driver, so I got a microwave, TV, all the heavy stuff. And the doctor said I couldn't lift more than 10 pounds. Those were doctor's orders. So I said, can we wait till tomorrow so that way he can help me load all my stuff into my Jeep so that way I can drive back to Baltimore and he can help me drive? And he said, sure, no problem, and that's that. Everyone left the office at 4:30. At 5 o'clock, he comes to me and says, I need that truck cleaned out by 5:30. So I look at him and I'm like, excuse me? You want me to clean out a whole OTR truck in 30 minutes against doctor's orders and then do what? He's like, I don't care, I need that truck cleaned out by 5:30. So I managed to do it. I went home on workers' comp. I got paid the 3 weeks. And then from there, I never went back because he was rude about it, and he pretty much did not give any sense against doctor's orders or against DOT law or against my safety. So I didn't go back. I mean, they claimed as a small company that they see you as a human being and they care for you, but if the owner himself doesn't care about your human safety, that's a very bad thing. Anyway, so from there I went to PAM Transport, and I was working for them, I'd say maybe about 4 weeks. 4 weeks I was working with them, and after 4 weeks, they were based out of Texas. Okay, that's where I had orientation. They were based out of Texas, and I was working them for 4 weeks. I had a family emergency, which I had to go home, but they were not getting me home. My mom's, well, no, it was, I can't remember off the top of my head, but someone died in my family. I'm not close with my family, but someone died, and I had to be there for the funeral. The company would not allow me to go home for the funeral. They said, you've been only out for 3 weeks, we need you to stay out. So I stayed out another week, and I said, I need to go home. You guys are not working with me anymore. So they would not let me go home, and I needed to go to New York, so they kept me in Florida, and then from Florida they sent me to California. I said, screw that. When I got to Texas, I would think I was in Houston, I can't remember, but I went into their drop yard, dropped the trailer, dropped my truck off, got a rental car from the airport, cleaned out my truck, and went home. Never heard back from them. From there, I went to Trans Am. I was there for about 2 weeks because, keep in mind, this is after the funeral and everything. I was there for about 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks, this is as a lease operator, I had 2 different trucks in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I managed to pull a whopping total of 800 miles. Anyone who's a truck driver knows 800 miles is only about a day and a half worth of running. The reason why I only got 500 miles was because every single day I had another breakdown that I could not move the truck. It was an automatic truck. Whether I put it in drive, it wouldn't go into gear, or whether I'm driving down the road and my air brakes would just suddenly pop out. In 2 weeks, 2 different trucks, keep in mind, because after the first week of that happening, I turned the truck in saying, okay, I'm going to try another truck. 2 weeks of that. I said, okay, I'm done. I owed them $1,000. Okay, fine, whatever. From there, I went to another company called JB Hunt. JB Hunt, I will say, is a pretty decent company. They wanted me to go OTR for 3 months, and then from there, I can switch to any position. JB Hunt, I work for them as an OTR driver. Their OTR division is very, very bad. Pretty much put it this way, their OTR division has, well, their whole company has like 19,000 drivers right now. But out of 19,000 drivers, their OTR division is only 2,000. If that says anything about their OTR division. But in order to get into any other company, you need at least a year of experience in trucking as an OTR driver. So I had at that point, I think it was like 9 months total with all that stuff. From there, I went as an OTR driver for JB Hunt, and then I switched. Keep in mind, at this point, I'm living in Kansas City, Missouri. I switched from OTR being to a regional intermodal driver. Now, regional intermodal driver, keep in mind, throughout the whole process, I was either a drive-in or a reefer unit driver. That's it. Once I went to a regional intermodal driver, it was not bad. I mean, I went, I was there roughly about 9 months. It wasn't bad. I mean, I enjoyed it. It was decent pay. I was roughly making about almost $1,000 to $1,100 take-home pay every week, and I was home for $34 every weekend. So it really wasn't bad. And you know, I enjoyed it. You know, from there I moved to from JB Hunt after being there for 9 months. Okay. So at this point, I have 18 months of experience being out on the road. I wanted at that point to progress my life to become either a trainer or use my experience that I have to help other people out on the road. Whether new drivers, experienced drivers, and I'm going to say this right now. I may be an experienced driver to some people, but I consider myself a new learner. Every single day in the trucking industry, you learn something new. So I may have 2-3 years of experience, but I consider myself a rookie. And anyone who has, you know, over 5, 6, even 40 years of experience, they should consider themselves a rookie. Reason why is because you and I both know the trucking industry, you learn something new every day. That's my personal saying. Some people may agree with me, some people may not, but that's on you. Now, So once I learned, once I said, hey, I want to use my experience that I have to teach other people, and maybe even to learn something new for myself, I decided to say, okay, well, I'm going to give JB Hunt a break. I can always come back. I enjoy what I'm doing with JB Hunt. They have good benefits. They have a decent pay. And I'm taking pretty decent home. I'm taking money home pretty decently. So I figured, okay, well, I'm going to go to Swift, because Swift has their recruiter was saying that if I join Swift, I can work for them for, I think it was 3 months, and then I can become a trainer. I can take the training course and become a trainer. I had another friend of mine who went to Prime with me. We were in the same night class, and he was working for Swift at the time. He used to be a lease operator also for Prime, for Prime. And then from there, he went to Swift, and now he's a lease operator trainer there, and he's making decent money. He had 2 trucks there. He had a buddy of his working team with the other truck, and he, was doing okay. So I figured, okay, well, I mean, it won't hurt to try it and become a trainer and see if I can help anyone, learn something new along the road. So I went to Swift. I went to the orientation. After I finished orientation, I got a call from my buddy saying, hey, can you do me a favor? I'm like, what? He said, I'm running low on funds. Is it okay if I hire you onto my truck as my co-driver for about 2 or 3 months, and we'll run together and we'll make money, and then, after that, once I'm back out of the hole, you can go back to doing what you want. Me personally, I said, sure, why not? He's a friend of mine, I'll help him out. So I went on the truck with him. I made him some money, but then we were making some money, but then he decided to take a week off in Florida, and he wanted me to still run his truck. Keep in mind, I'm not making any money. He's not paying me. So I'm working 3 months for him pretty much for free. And now he takes a week off in Florida and wants me to run. I'm living off of my savings. Okay. So I'm like, okay, but after this week, I mean, you better come back, and from there, I'm pretty much getting off the truck because I need to start making money. He's like, that's fine. So I got a load after I dropped him off in Florida to Wyoming, I think it was, or I can't remember, but I was going through I-80, and through Nebraska, through Wyoming. I was only 17,000 pounds. I was really light, and there was ice on the ground, blowing snow, and high winds at 40 miles an hour. So I said, hey, I gotta shut this truck down. It is unsafe to drive. Called dispatch, called my buddy and told him what's going on. Keep in mind, he's in Florida where it's nice, 70 degrees, and I'm in Wyoming where it's 10 degrees and it's blowing snow and all that stuff. After I'm sitting there for about a day and a half, it's not getting any better, it's only getting worse. So I call him, I update him, and he's getting pissed off at me. He's like, I told you to run the truck. I said, well, let me ask you this. Would you rather want that truck in the ditch destroyed? Or would you rather have it sitting here doing nothing? So he shut up. And I'm like, enjoy your vacation in Florida. I'm the one who's working for you and not making a cent. Enjoy your vacation and don't give me any bullshit. So I was like, okay. And, from there, he didn't bother calling me again. But I kept getting all the hate messages from dispatch that he was sending to dispatch, saying, oh, why'd you send him there, blah, 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 So he wasn't really getting mad at me. He was more getting mad at the dispatch for sending him up there in that bad weather. So anyway, after I delivered that load, which almost took a week, well, I think it was 4 or 5 days until it got better. But I delivered that load, and then from there, I went back to the company. I gave him his truck. He ended up quitting, and he never came back from Florida. He said, fuck it. He quit. Turned in both trucks, and he quit. Keep in mind now, I have no money because I just used my savings to work for my buddy to help him. And so now I'm working as a company driver, and the dispatcher, well, the recruiter said I can only work 3 months before I can take the test to become an instructor. Because I have the winter driving experience, I have the at least 6 months driving experience, but they want 3 months driving experience with the company. So I'm like, all right. So after 3 months of dealing with, the company's bullshit of, oh, you got to go here and blah 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 blah, I was starting to get sick of it. So I called dispatch up after 3 months, and I'm like, hey, I want to apply for the training position. They said, well, you got to be driving for 6 months. I'm like, yeah, I have almost a year and a half. They're like, no, you got to be driving with the company for 6 months. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then I'm driving for roughly about 2 more months, and I have an emergency with myself. I had to go to the ER. So it was a medical issue that you can't just go to any ER to deal with. It was a medical issue that you had to go to a specialist pretty much to deal with. And the only specialist that I knew is where I was living, okay? So I'm driving, and dispatch is not getting me home. They're pretty much avoiding me. So at this point, I get sick of it, and I just throw my truck in the shop and clean it out and go home. I say, I'm never going back to you. From there, I went right back to JB Hunt after my emergency was handled, and I was working back in the intermodal field. And then from there, I decided to move from Kansas City to Virginia, and I needed a different position in Virginia because, they had intermodal, but I wanted to try something else because the person I was dating wanted me home a little bit more. So I figured, okay, well, I'll move out there where she is, and I went there. She decided, okay, well, so I went out to Virginia, and I switched positions in JB Hunt from intermodal to the Family Dollar account. Family Dollar account is where you hand unload your shit. Excuse my language, you're afraid. Hold on.